What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop's Zone TV, and today, ooh, damn. Hey, y'all get y'all seatbelts ready, man. Y'all gonna have to buckle up for this ride, cause I'm finna let off some shots. I'm gonna let off some shots for real on this one. I just watched this documentary thanks to my mother-in-law. Shouts out to my mother-in-law. She put me onto this documentary. She wanted to know my thoughts, and man, I was not expecting to be this pissed off about a documentary. Like it's been a long time since I've seen a documentary that really pissed me off. And what documentary am I talking about? Well, you see the picture right here. It's called Rumble. The Indians who did some shit and whatever, basically, blah, 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 whatever. It's not even really that important, the title. But the propaganda that this documentary pushed, the lies and revisionist history, I cannot let this shit rest, y'all. I could not let it rest because it's straight disrespectful. It's straight blasphemy. And it really shows the lack of respect that they have for black people. And I did not expect this to be that centered on black music. But I understand because they're trying to paint a picture that they are actually behind all the music that we hear today. Because, you know, it's undeniable in American history, in American pop culture and music, how influential black people are when it comes to jazz, blues, gospel, rock and roll, R&B. Those are things that our ancestors created, bar none. And so when you look at the heart and soul of American music, which happens to be things that black people had a large hand in creating because we did create those things, right? What's the best way you can tell your story to seem somewhat relevant to American culture, American music, may I add? Oh yeah, you hijack things that black people created, and you spin the narrative around to say, well, we actually influenced this. We influenced black people. Black people got it from us, and our story is not being told. And this is basically what this fucking documentary is implying the whole damn time. Is that blues, gospel, R&B, jazz, you thought black people created that. No. Native Americans created that. And by the way, just for the record, this is not an attack on Native Americans. I am not attacking Native Americans. Man, I'm with a lot of real indigenous people when it comes to other people appropriating their culture. I am totally against that. If you look on my page, if this is your first time coming to my channel, look on my page and see how many times I've called my own people out on appropriating indigenous culture. And, you know, unfortunately, this documentary is definitely appropriating. It's definitely whitewashing. And I hate to say whitewashing. I was trying to think of something else, but I didn't want to come off derogatory towards indigenous people. But I can't let this shit ride. And for the record, I don't know how much of a hand. I mean, there is some clearly indigenous people that are being interviewed and pushing a narrative that, oh yeah, we were either involved from the very beginning of these music genres that we know today and love, or we actually influenced the people to create this kind of music. But this film has they have a lot of pretendians and folks who just, come on now, like really. Like these people may be 1/16 Native American. Some Elizabeth Warrens. It's full of that shit. I'm telling you, a lot of these people are pretendians. Until they prove with the DNA test, and some of these people they can't prove because some of these people have already passed. But I'm going to debunk a lot of information that was presented in this documentary as facts. I'm going to debunk that shit. Let's start that right off the bat. All right, now the documentary starts off focusing on Link Ray. For y'all who don't know who Link Ray is, he's a famous, iconic, legendary musician. Was considered one of the top 50 guitarists that ever graced rock and roll. So, you know, That's who they start off with, Link Ray. And, you know, he claimed that he was of Shawnee descent. He was a Shawnee Indian. And I'm only using Indian because they use Indian a lot, which for the record, I thought using Indian was seen as somewhat of a racial slur. It's incorrect. They're not from India. But the whole point of being called Indian was because of a European's mistake. They were trying to go to India, and they ended up in the Western Hemisphere and just said, to hell with it. You know how white folks are. It was like, well, shit, we gonna call them Indian anyway. I was supposed to go to India, so we're gonna call them Indian. All right, but these are indigenous people. But anyway, so he claims he's Shawnee, right? Y'all see this, man? I'm not trying to say I can detect who is who based off facial features right off the bat. It's tricky like that. I'm not a geneticist. And even geneticists don't do that. They, use science to prove these things, experimentation. So you can't just look at someone and say, they're such and such. But God damn it, come on now. This man is about as Native American as Elizabeth Warren. Like, are y'all kidding me? Are y'all serious? Look, could he have some Native American ancestry? It's possible. But shit, I mean, all we have is basically him saying he's Shawnee. And the fact that no one questions a man whose phenotype clearly looks what many would consider Western European says to me that people are willing to look the other way in exchange to claim their relevancy on American music. This is what this shit is. This is exactly what this shit is. The man looks like my old goddamn manager. He looks just like my manager. How you doing, Wade? How's it going? No different. No goddamn different. And look, man, I am not taking anything away from his musical talents or his contributions to rock music. Look, man, his style of playing the guitar, I give credit where credit due. His style, his technique of playing the guitar did leave an impact on a lot of people in rock and roll. That's understandable. But then to say, man, this dude, just because he identified as Shawnee, that he's a Native American and Native Americans, this is what Native Americans gave to the people, is a reach. Is a reach. This man said he was Shawnee through his mama. And his mama used to be, she was a Shawnee. She used to go out to the fields and preach to the Negroes in the field and the Cherokees in the field. Nigga, come on, man. Shawnee, please. Shawnee, please, man. Really. And look at these pictures. I'm just saying, these people, when you think of Native American, these are not the first people you think of. These are not the first people you think of. Again, what makes him any different than Elizabeth Warren, who people gave such a hard time, which is they rightfully so. She deserved a hard time. But you mean to tell me this motherfucker is going to pass for Native American just like that? And notice he said his mom. He didn't say his dad was Native American. What do we do? They start off with this. Man, they are so desperate to make themselves relevant that they are willing to just hang on to any goddamn thing. And this is how this documentary opens up. This is how they open up. And this man is in North Carolina. He's not on some reservation. He didn't grow up on some reservation. Okay. That's one. Link Ray. That's part one. Let's go to another thing. Let's go to another bit. All right, I'm gonna show y'all this clip of this woman right here, Joy Harjo. This is the segment where they go to New Orleans and they talk about the black culture in New Orleans and whatnot. And this segment right here is a real big reach. But y'all listen to what she says, and I'm gonna show y'all how she's wrong.
It was a Muskogean village through this area. Our music is called stomp dance, and what you hear first is the calling, a call and response, where the leader calls out, and then the men answer.
All right, so this woman right here, Joy, which by the way, I'm not saying she's a pretendian. I've done some research on her history, and she seems to be somewhat legitimate. I think she's of mixed ancestry, but I'm not gonna hold that against her, because if you know the history of Europeans interacting with indigenous people, a lot of times it was some racial cleansing going on. There was also some complicated interactions between these two. No different than Europeans interacting with black people, African people. When I say interacting, I mean raping African women. So I won't hold that against her. But what I will do is proof how wrong she is in one of the statements she made. And I'm talking about the statement of the Muskogean village that she claims ran through New Orleans. Now, I hate to bust your bubble, Miss Joy, because you're an author, right? And you're accomplished. You're a very accomplished person in your field. But I don't think history is your strong suit. And ma'am, I think you grew up in Oklahoma. So, I mean, you could have did research on what happened in Louisiana, but I highly doubt it. But there were no Muskogean villages in New Orleans during the French rule, then later the Spanish rule, and then eventually American rule. And for the record, I'm talking on the period of chattel slavery. And what we know today is New Orleans. Now, there were other indigenous nations in that part of Louisiana, like Chitimacha, Natchez, Caddo, Choctaw, just to name a few. But the Muskogee Nation was not in Louisiana like that, and definitely not in New Orleans. So I don't know where you get this village from. I don't. I looked, I scoured the internet for it, and I didn't see it. So, I mean, and there is, I believe there is a nation still present in Louisiana, and it's not in that part of Louisiana. And it's only like maybe 200 members, but not prevalent enough to influence enslaved people in New Orleans during that time. Like, pull up your facts, pull up your receipts. I want to see them. I want to see them. All right. Now, the New Orleans Black Indian segment. Oh, my God. That was the most laughable and inaccurate portion of this documentary. I mean, God damn. I mean, this part right here, I was like, is this a danecalloway production? Because it was starting to sound like danecalloway. And mind you, now, this documentary was made in 2017. I don't know if Netflix just acquired the license for it and just released it, but it was made in 2017. And ironically, danecalloway popped up on YouTube around 2017. So I'm not sure if, danecalloway was influenced by this documentary, or if danecalloway influenced this guy that I'm about to show in the documentary, because it's like verbatim. It's word for word.
Indian settlers came here. They first enslaved Indians, lots of them. And they figured out the best way to do this is to ship the men elsewhere. Being hunter-gatherer societies, they knew how to escape and how to evade the raiders and how to come back and fight. So you ship the men to the Caribbean, ship some of them to Africa, keep the women here. And then later on, bring in African slaves. 90% of the people in the ships coming from Africa on some of those ships were men. Who do they have children with? And this is why 85% of African Americans who have been in this country before the Civil War claim Native American ancestry, and all of them almost say great-grandmother on the mother's line.
All right, I want y'all to get a good look at this guy right here. Look at his title. He's a historian and a geneticist. This is what the documentary has. Now, look at this picture right here. Now, this is possibly the biggest piece of shit that they put on this documentary. I mean, it's the biggest bold-faced lie on this entire documentary. And after that, I put everything into question. I questioned everything on this documentary, and I questioned everybody behind the documentary. This man right here that they labeled a historian and a geneticist. Do y'all not see this? Do y'all see this, man? I had to look, because I said, man, if he's a geneticist and a historian, maybe I need to reevaluate my information, and I need to look into who this person is. And this is what I found. This man, Mr. Jarvis, that the documentary claims is a historian and a geneticist, is not who they claim he is. That's right. He is not who this documentary claims he is. This man, Mr. Jarvis, is a neurobiologist. He's a neurobiologist, y'all. I'm not making this shit up. Y'all see it. The man, y'all know what he does? He researches vocal learning in songbirds. You heard me. He researches vocal learning in songbirds. That's his specialty. He's not a historian. He's not a geneticist. He's a neurobiologist. He studies birds, y'all. He studies the language of birds and song. How you get studying the languages of songbirds to a historian on music, on African American culture and indigenous culture? See, y'all, the average person wouldn't research this shit, but I would. See, I mean, now, if they would lie about this man's profession, what else would they lie about in this film? This film is clearly not credible if they would do that. It's obvious to me that there's an agenda throughout this entire film to marginalize black culture in favor of indigenous people. I mean, come on, y'all. And then they turn around and use black faces to tell their revised story because, let's just be real, we know a lot of black people tend to believe they either have Indian in their family or now simply they're not even African. They're just indigenous aborigines. So they're taking advantage of black people's stupidity and also the American public. You know, and I mean, it's just, it's laughable. I mean, it's comical at this point how far they will reach to minimize and change history just to big up indigenous people. And you know, this theme in this New Orleans segment is that blacks are Indians masked as black people. Like it's just so comical, man. It's so clumsy that this idea that people with clear West and Central African features are really being indigenous. I mean, come on, man. They don't prove any of this with scientific data, historical records. It's just certain people's accounts and things that they believe. Like, I'm supposed to trust these people based off what? Off what? They never cite any of their sources whatsoever. I mean, they don't cite any goddamn thing. But this neurobiologist, Mr. Jarvis, implies that majority of so-called black people are overwhelmingly Native American. Yet we know through thousands of genetic testing throughout decades and decades of research, it's actually quite opposite. I'm telling you, I'm not lying. I'm not lying. I know a lot of our people tend to believe that we have Indian in our family, but the data says otherwise. On average, African Americans have less than 2.0% Native American ancestry in their DNA. I'm gonna let y'all Google that yourselves. Now, there could be an exception to black people in Louisiana, at least in southern Louisiana, because they can tend to have more Native American admixture in their DNA. However, it's not really a significant amount either, on average. And actually, you're probably more likely to find more European DNA with black people in southern Louisiana than you would the average African American throughout the rest of the country. That's just a fact. I'm sorry, but not sorry. Also, might I add, in this segment, they put an emphasis on black people running away to Native American territory to imply that African Americans were influenced by Native Americans when they ran away to their territories. Yet, what I find funny about that emphasis is that they don't mention how Native American people during that same period enslaved African people, enslaved a lot of African people. Matter of fact, even during the Trail of Tears, there were some indigenous people that brought their enslaved Africans along with them. So just imagine that, how harsh the Trail of Tears was for indigenous people. Then imagine how it felt for those indigenous people's enslaved property via our ancestors. Imagine how they felt. Here you are, a slave to someone being forced out of their homeland. Yeesh. I'm just saying. All right, now this woman right here, I think her name is Pura Fee or whatever. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she rubbed me the wrong way. Like, she really rubbed me the wrong way. And I don't know this woman personally, so I'm gonna keep it somewhat respectful. But man, she came off like she had a sense of arrogance, and like she was talking when she talked about black people's music. It was almost in a condescending tone. I don't know if that was her intentions, but that's how it came off. I mean, the body language with her and the other women in her vocalist group when they were marginalizing black people's contribution to music. I mean, it was really telling to me. I mean, the body language just was like, we full of shit. We're saying some things that sound good in theory, but it's full of shit. Based off what? I mean, damn. Like look, there's one particular scene in this film, right, where they're on a plantation in North Carolina, and one of the vocalists, female vocalists, in this group acknowledges that the banjo is an African instrument. I mean, she says it plain and clear that the banjo is an African instrument. You can't see, and that's crazy too, that they even acknowledge that in this film, because you can't deny that. You can't deny that the banjo is an African instrument, right? However, somehow, by some crazy mental gymnastics, they find a way to imply that Native Americans influenced these Negroes who brought over the banjo from Africa to create blues. You heard me. They found a way to say, look, yeah, the banjo is African. And they didn't say it in these words. However, we taught them blues. We influenced the blues. Matter of fact, this woman right here claimed that some people say that our traditional music is pre-blues. Ma'am, I looked to see if that was a thing. And it's not that much of a thing, if any. It's not. Blues stems from spirituals, field songs, hollering in cornfields, and all kind of other songs, styles of music that can be traced back in some shape, form, or fashion to Africa right from slavery. All right? That style of music, that style of singing took remnants from Africa, blended in with our experiences during slavery. But see, evidently, according to these women, when the enslaved Africans were working on the field, y'all, when they were confined to the plantation, they must have heard those Native Americans over in their territory singing and doing war songs in their territories. I guess because those territories are right there next to these plantations where they could hear. I mean, just it's straight disrespectful the way they do it. They do it so casually too. They do it casually. I mean, there's one instance where this one particular woman claims that the music of the Southeast, right, is the music that you hear today. That the music, and let me explain that. The music that her ancestors created, right, the style of singing that her ancestors created, which were indigenous people, she's claiming that influenced all the music that you hear today. And it's convenient how that particular music, that style of music that they displayed in a clip, which sounds like indigenous music mixed with soul music that we created, but they're basically saying like that music predates slavery, colonialism, that predates European contact into the Americas. It's like, yeah, how fucking convenient is that? That you can claim that this music predates white European contact when there were no recordings. They didn't have any technology to record this type of music. Yet we don't hear that when they were doing the first recordings of indigenous people, we didn't hear that style of music. When they were doing chants and doing their traditional style of music, their style of singing, we didn't hear We didn't hear that. I'm just saying.
We hear the birds here, we hear the water here, the rivers, these songs, and that informs what comes out of our mouth. All of American music that came from the South was informed by our land and therefore by us.
That statement right there was a slap in the face to black people. That was a slap in the face to our ancestors. That was a slap in the face to our culture. See, she knew exactly what she was doing when she made that comment. Because she was implying that because black people were largely in the South, and we understand that the South birthed jazz, it birthed blues, it birthed rock and roll. 90% of black people in this country before World War I were in the South. And that was a straight shot at us. That was marginalizing us, undermining us at its finest. Come on, man. And you know what? Let me move forward on that. I already proved that point. But this leads me to Charlie Patton. Now, I'll admit, the one picture that they have of Charlie Patton, you could easily see what we would consider to be indigenous people's features, right? Charlie Patton himself, to be fair, I like to be fair, reference possibly being of native descent. Charlie Patton is considered the grandfather of Delta blues. Now, honestly, people don't truly know what his ancestry is. It's said that he could be a mulatto, or, he has some Cherokee ancestry on top of him being a mulatto. The problem with this assertion of Charlie Patton in this documentary is the fact that they attribute Native American culture for influencing his style of blues, thus implying that the grandfather of Delta blues influenced other famous black blues artists because of his Native American background. But see, this is the problem. This is where the problem lays. Charlie Patton didn't grow up in a Native American territory. He didn't grow up amongst a high concentration of Native Americans. He grew up on a plantation in the Mississippi Delta around a bunch of black people. And we're talking a large percentage of people who were raised by former slaves via parents and grandparents. Charlie Patton did not invent the blues. And I am not disrespecting Mr. Patton because he deserves his flowers. But he did not invent the blues. Keep in mind, around this time, other regions developed their own style of blues. East Texas blues popped up around the same time, as did other regions, like I stated. Charlie Patton's contemporaries were all black, not Native American. You cannot show me that kind of consistency among Native American populations throughout this country during or before the early days of blues. And the fact that you have this woman, Pura Fee, reaching like a big dog. I mean, literally, she shows an example, a quote unquote example of how Native Americans influence black music, right? Because she does the stereotypical chant, right? Hey ya, 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 to oh hey ya, hey yeah, yeah, icebox in the sunny night. I sung a little better than Ray J, didn't I? That's what she's applying. She's applying that those run-ins that we know black folks love when they singing. That comes from indigenous people. That's Indian music. The fuck out of here. The fuck out of here. I mean, come on. That if that ain't a reach, I don't know what is. And see, the funny thing is, they're giving so much credit to Charlie Patton, which he deserves some credit. But they're really giving him credit because they're making this claim that he's Native American, right? But they fail to mention the fact that Charlie Patton had a tutor. See, Charlie Patton, as much as he pushed the genre by influencing others, he was also a student of blues. He was tutored by Henry Sloan. Yes, Henry Sloan. Without question, a black man. Why didn't they mention Henry Sloan? Again, why didn't they mention Henry Sloan? Maybe because, hey, they wouldn't have a documentary implying that Native Americans created blues music. I'm just saying. And there were others during his day and age. And I'm talking about Henry Sloan. There were others that were creating a style of blues a style of music that we would later know as blues before Charlie Patton. Facts. Now at this point, man, I'm just fucking through with this documentary. You know, mind you, I'm almost like 44 minutes into it. You know, I didn't finish the whole documentary because it's only so much lies and exaggerated truths you can take. Also, you know, at some point they started speaking on Jimi Hendrix. Now, I really didn't pay that much attention to the Jimi Hendrix thing. But, you know, Jimi Hendrix, no disrespect to a legend, but he pretty much did what a lot of black people did, which was he claimed that he had I believe a grandmother that was Cherokee. Full-blooded Cherokee. Oh, my God, full-blooded Cherokee. Look, let me tell you this. My family, on both sides, claim that we have some Native American ancestry. On one side, it's supposed to be Cherokee. On the other side, it's supposed to be Blackfoot. No disrespect. And I hate to tell you, but I took 2 separate DNA tests. I know the white man's test, but I took 2 separate DNA tests. One came back 1.0% Mesoamerican. The other one came back 0. I had none. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But they're really just hanging on at this point. They're trying to hang on to any type of iconic artist to really push themselves in American modern music. I believe that's what it is, because I understand, y'all. Look, indigenous people have become invisible, and their contributions to America as a whole is unnoticed, right? But this thirst to become so relevant to the point where you put black people's clear contributions, clear origins to the side is disgusting. This documentary right here is majority some pretendian, 1/16th Choctaw revisionist bullshit. That's what it is. Do we need to acknowledge and explore contributions Native Americans have made in modern music more? Yes, we definitely do. But not at the expense of rewriting history and dismissing music that black people created out of struggle and oppression. And not only rewriting history, but outright lying all throughout this documentary. There's a long history in our country of people pretending to be Native Americans or falsely claiming Native American ancestry. Might I remind you of that famous Native American in the 70s who turned out to be a fake Native American. And he spent majority of his life pretending to be something he wasn't. Y'all remember this cat? He went by the name of Iron Eyes Cody. Ooh, Iron Eyes. Well, come to find out, this man was not Native American. He was Italian. He was Italian American. His real name was Oscar DeCorti, I think, something like that. Man, if I butchered that, my fault. My fault. But you get the point. He was not no goddamn Native American. And unfortunately, a lot of people have done this, both white and black Americans. This is one of the main reasons, y'all, why Native Americans make people take tests to prove their ancestry. This is one of the reasons why. Because people just lie about this shit with a straight face. And you know what? I'm very shocked. that Netflix would approve this. Especially considering that they have another great historical documentary called Who Are We? A Chronicle of Racism in America. They have this documentary on Netflix right now. I suggest, if y'all want to look at something with some historical accurate context, go check out that documentary. Again, that's Who Are We? A Chronicle of Racism in America. Because they quote actual people. They don't take quotes out of context. They have credible sources that they can cite to back up their claims. This Rumble documentary right here, is a big budgeted piece of shit. And it don't belong on Netflix. It don't belong on any major platform. You know what? Shit, fuck it. I'll be more accepting, to be honest with you, of the claim that white people make, that black people got their music and culture from Ulster Scots, than this shit. Because at least descendants of Ulster Scots had more interaction with enslaved people during the increased demand of slavery in the South compared to indigenous nations around the same time. Majority of black people during that time period was enslaved and confined to plantations. Another percentage were in urban centers where indigenous people were not in abundance. That's a fact. And look, I can see the similarities in musical expression between Native Americans and American Africans, but not nearly enough to suggest blacks were influenced by Native Americans. Blues, gospel, jazz, rock and roll, and R&B should be way more consistent in Native American culture during that time period than what you find within black communities all throughout the South during that same time. And the same goes for whites who try to claim blues is a black man's version of bluegrass, or what was in Scotland prior to colonialism. Some of the earliest minstrel show performers were of Scottish and Irish descent. And these shows mocked black people and created caricatures of them for entertainment purposes. But keep in mind, they were mocking black people based on a culture that we created, based on what they saw and then interpreted in a negative light. Y'all got to stop this shit. Y'all got to stop this. And I really think Netflix approved this because it was another people of color. I think that's the only reason why. They didn't want to come off insensitive. They didn't want to be the ones that turned down a documentary that exposed the public to indigenous people's contributions to music. Right? So they said, hey, let's do it. But this is some bullshit. I'm all for people telling their story. But again, not at the expense of shunning and dehumanizing and marginalizing our culture. It's our culture. It's not yours. It's not yours. I'm sorry. It's not your culture. And look, I get it. Look, if this was some sick twist to say, y'all stay appropriating our culture, so we're going to take yours, I get it. But two wrongs don't make a right. So if y'all got Netflix, man, I'll say watch it. Watch it so you can see how much bullshit is presented to the public. But after that, man, fuck it. It is what it is, man. I feel like this is dangerous to promote this kind of revisionist history. Very disgusting. But I've said enough. I said a lot. You know, tell me what you think. If you agree or disagree, let me know. Till next time, like and subscribe and holla.